The measuring tape snapped back with the force of Karen Moore's indignation, nearly slicing through the morning air as she stood, hands planted firmly on her hips at the edge of Tim Foster's lawn. 3¼ inches. His grass was 3¼ inches tall, a quarter inch over the Mountain Vista Estate's strict 3-inch maximum. Gotcha, she whispered, a smile spreading across her face as she made a decisive check on her clipboard. Karen, 53 years old, the perfectly maintained blonde bob that hadn't changed style since 1998, had served as the Mountain Vista Estates Homeowners Association president for 7 consecutive years, a reign characterized by steadily increasing fines and regulations. Her morning patrol of the neighborhood was the highlight of her day, a ritual she performed with the precision of a military operation and the enthusiasm of someone who had finally found her calling. Tim's door opened before Karen could even ring the bell. "It's not even 8 a.m. on a Saturday, Karen," Tim said, still in his bathrobe, coffee mug clutched in one hand like a shield. Section 7, paragraph 12 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that lawn height must not exceed 3 inches, Karen recited, her voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who had memorized every rule, amendment, and footnote. "Your grass is measuring at 3¼ inches." Tim took a long, deliberate sip of his coffee. "You know what, Karen? I'm going to cut it this afternoon like I do every Saturday." "The violation has already been documented," she said, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "That would be a $50 fine, and if it's not cut by noon, it doubles." "This is ridiculous," Tim muttered, but Karen was already walking away, her sensible shoes clicking against the sidewalk, her posture perfect. Karen hadn't always been like this. 5 years ago, she had been Karen Wilson, a marketing executive with a corner office, a marriage of 22 years, and what she thought was a secure future. Then came the layoff, the divorce, and the downsizing to Mountain Vista Estates. The HOA presidency had started as something to keep her busy, a way to have some control in a life that had spiraled beyond her grasp. Now it was her identity. As she continued her patrol, Karen spotted Melissa Chen placing her recycling bin at the curb. It was 7:58 a.m. and collection didn't begin until 8 o'clock. Technically, Melissa was within regulations, but Karen felt a twinge of disappointment. "Good morning, Melissa," Karen called out, her voice cheerful, but with an unmistakable edge, almost cutting it close with the recycling today. Melissa's smile was tight. "Good morning, Karen. Actually, I checked the time." Of course, Karen replied, making a show of looking at her watch. 2 whole minutes to spare. Excellent compliance. The satisfaction of Tim's violation was already fading. Karen needed more. Her eyes swept the immaculate street, searching for infractions like a hawk scanning for prey. Her gaze landed on the Johnson property, specifically on their new garden gnome. Karen felt a rush of adrenaline. Decorative lawn ornaments required pre-approval by the aesthetic committee, which conveniently also consisted of Karen. As she marched toward her next target, Karen didn't notice how the neighbors' curtains twitched closed as she passed, how conversations paused, or how children were quietly ushered inside. She didn't see eye rolls or hear the sighs. All she knew was that in Mountain Vista Estates, order would be maintained by her hand with her clipboard, one violation at a time. "Absolutely unacceptable," Karen declared, her shadow falling across Aisha Johnson's carefully tended flower beds. This gnome was not approved by the aesthetic committee. Aisha looked up from where she knelt in the soil, gardening gloves covered in dirt, a trowel in one hand. A small ceramic gnome, a gift from her late grandmother, stood cheerfully among the petunias. "It's just a garden gnome, Karen," Aisha said, her voice leveled despite the familiar frustration building. "It's not hurting anyone." Section 12, paragraph 3, Karen replied, already writing on her clipboard. "All exterior decorative elements must receive written approval prior to installation." She tore off the violation slip with a flourish. "That would be a $75 fine, and the unapproved item needs to be removed within 24 hours. Aisha stood slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. At 34, she was younger than Karen by nearly 2 decades, but the wariness in her eyes spoke of someone who had already endured too many of these encounters. "My grandmother gave me this before she died," Aisha said quietly. "It's been in my family for generations." Something flickered across Karen's face, a momentary softening, perhaps recognition of her own losses, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Rules were rules. Without rules, there was chaos, and chaos led to declining property values. Karen had learned that lesson the hard way when her ex-husband's financial chaos had cost her everything. "I'm sorry about your grandmother," Karen said, not sounding particularly sorry at all, "but we have standards in Mountain Vista. You signed the agreement when you moved in." Aisha's husband, Michael, emerged from the house, drawn by the tension in the air. "Is there a problem?" "Your wife has installed an unapproved lawn ornament," Karen explained, handing Michael a violation slip. "The committee meets next Thursday if you want to submit a formal request for approval." Michael's jaw tightened, but Aisha placed a hand on his arm. It's fine, honey. We'll deal with it. Karen nodded, satisfied, and turned to leave, already scanning for her next target. But Michael's voice stopped her. Actually, it's not fine, he said. We're tired of this, Karen. The entire neighborhood is tired of this. Karen turned back slowly, her grip tightening on her clipboard. Excuse me? You've turned this neighborhood into your personal kingdom, Michael continued. Last month, it was the bird feeder. Before that, our mailbox was supposedly 2 inches too tall. All documented violations, Karen countered, feeling her heartbeat quicken. Confrontation was uncomfortable, but she would not back down. She couldn't. The rules were all she had. We're calling a special HOA meeting, Michael announced. We've already got the signatures. Next Friday, 7 p.m. We're going to discuss some changes. Karen felt a cold wave of panic wash over her. Changes? To her rules? To her authority? The clipboard trembled slightly in her hand, but she squared her shoulders. Fine, she said, her voice ice. We'll have a meeting. But I think you'll find the majority appreciates the work I do to maintain our community standards. As Karen walked away, her mind raced. A challenge her authority was unthinkable. She needed allies. She needed evidence of her value. Most of all, she needed to show these ungrateful residents what happened when her vigilance slipped. Back in her immaculately kept house, Karen poured herself a glass of Chardonnay. At 8:30 a.m., technically against her own personal rules, but exceptions had to be made in times of crisis. She unlocked the bottom drawer of her desk and pulled out a thick folder labeled Enforcement Options. Inside were contingency plans for rebellions just like this one. Karen had not maintained her iron grip on Mountain Vista by being unprepared. As she flipped through the pages, a slow smile spread across her face. By Friday, she would remind everyone exactly why they needed her. By Monday morning, Karen had implemented the first phase of her counteroffensive, Mountain Vista's first enhanced neighborhood security initiative. In reality, this meant Karen had recruited retired security guard Frank Holloway to patrol the neighborhood in a golf cart with Neighborhood Tichich hastily painted on its side. Frank, 70 years old with a permanent squint and a penchant for exaggerating his law enforcement background, had jumped at the chance to wear a uniform again, even if it was just a navy polo shirt with an embroidered MV8OS security that Karen had rush ordered online. Remember, Frank, Karen instructed as they stood beside his golf cart at 7 a.m. sharp, were looking for any and all violations. Garbage bins left out past collection time, unauthorized gatherings, parking infractions, document everything. Frank nodded solemnly, adjusting the flashlight on his belt. You can count on me, ma'am. I was practically a deputy in my day. Karen knew perfectly well that Frank had been a mall security guard in the suburbs of Cleveland, not the hardened law enforcement officer he pretended to be, but his enthusiasm for authority made him the perfect deputy for her cause. By midday, Frank had issued 17 citations, printed on paper Karen had designed to look vaguely official, including one to 9-year-old Sophie Williams for operating a lemonade stand without a vendor permit, and another to elderly Mr. Gonzalez for sitting on his front porch in a rocking chair that was non-approved color for visible outdoor furniture. The neighborhood simmered with tension. Text messages flew between residents. The HOA Facebook group, which Karen moderated with dictatorial vigilance, suddenly spawned 3 unofficial Mountain Vista rebellion groups that she couldn't access. Karen monitored it all with growing unease, but she would not back down. At 3 o'clock, she joined Frank for the afternoon patrol, clipboard in hand, a walkie-talkie ostentatiously clipped to her belt. Oh, for God's sake, muttered Jessica Taylor as Karen and Frank rolled past her driveway in the golf cart, now adorned with flashing yellow light. This is getting ridiculous. Did you say something, resident? Frank called out, bringing the cart to an abrupt stop. Nothing at all, Officer Holloway, Jessica replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Just admiring your vehicle. Karen stepped out of the cart, sensing insubordination. Jessica, we've noticed your hydrangeas are extending beyond the approved flower bed boundaries by approximately 3 inches. That's a violation off. Section 9, paragraph 18. Jessica finished for her. Yes, I know all about your sacred texts, Karen. Karen bristled. Well, then you should also know that's a $60 fine. Jessica folded her arms. I'll be sure to bring that up at Friday's meeting, along with a discussion about using HOA funds to pay for Frank's little costume and golf cart accessories. Karen felt her face grow hot. This is a legitimate security expense. Is it? Jessica raised an eyebrow. Because I checked the bylaws, the ones you're so fond of quoting, and security expenditures over $500 require board approval. Did you get that, Karen? Karen hadn't. The golf cart rental, Frank's hourly rate, the uniforms, and the equipment had all been charged to the HOA emergency fund, which Karen had always treated as her personal discretionary account. The board granted me emergency powers during the last meeting, Karen lied smoothly. Funny, I don't remember voting on that, Jessica said. And I'm on the board. Frank, sensing the tension, awkwardly adjusted his FOC badge. Should I issue a citation here? Yes, Karen snapped at the same moment. Jessica said, You wouldn't dare. The standoff was interrupted by the arrival of Tim Foster, who had apparently been alerted to the confrontation via the resistance text chain. Everything okay here, Jess? Tim asked, positioning himself beside her in a show of solidarity. Karen looked from Tim to Jessica, suddenly aware that other niggers were emerging from their homes, watching from windows, gathering on sidewalks. This was not how her operation was supposed to unfold. She needed to retreat and regroup. We'll continue this discussion at the meeting, Karen said stiffly, climbing back into the golf cart. Frank, let's proceed with our patrol. As they drove away, Karen could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her back. For the first time since taking control of the HOA, she felt a flicker of doubt. But doubt was weakness, and Karen Moore was not weak. She would double down. If they wanted war, she would give them war. By Wednesday morning, every mailbox in Mountain Vista Estates contained an anonymous letter printed on HOA letterhead. Karen had worked until 2 a.m. crafting the perfect message. A masterpiece of passive-aggressive community manipulation that she was quite proud of. Dear valued Mountain Vista resident, it began innocuously enough. It has come to the board's attention that certain elements within our community are seeking to undermine the very standards that maintain our property values and community prestige. The letter went on to detail, with charts and graphs Karen had created herself, how property values in HOAs with lax enforcement drop an average of 15% over 5 years. It highlighted recent security concerns in neighboring developments without similar protective measures. It reminded residents of the legally binding nature of the covenants they had signed. Finally, it warned that the upcoming meeting called by disgruntled individuals could result in special assessments if costly legal challenges arose from changing established procedures. Karen watched from behind her living room curtains as residents collected their mail. She saw furrowed brows, heads shaking, neighbors showing each other the letter and talking animatedly. She smiled to herself. Fear was a powerful motivator, especially fear of financial loss. What Karen didn't anticipate was Aisha Johnson's background in corporate communications or Michael Johnson's law degree. By noon, a counter letter had been hand-delivered to every home, dismantling Karen's claims point by point, citing actual legal precedents about HOA overreach, and including statements from 3 local real estate agents confirming that Mountain Vista's draconian enforcement was actually becoming a liability in home sales. Karen's phone rang. It was Frank. They're organizing, he reported breathlessly. Meeting at the Johnsons' house. At least 20 cars. What? Karen felt panic rising. This wasn't supposed to happen. People were supposed to be cowed, frightened into compliance. Get over there and document everything. Every car, every person. Check for parking violations. I tried, Frank admitted. It parked perfectly. And they invited me in for coffee. They what? They were real nice about it. Said I was welcome to join them, that this wasn't about me, that they understood I was just doing a job. Karen could hear the uncertainty in Frank's voice. He was wavering. She couldn't lose her only ally. Frank, listen to me, she said urgently. They're manipulating you. That's what they do. They want to destroy everything we've built. Remember how proud you were when I gave you that uniform? They want to take that away from you. There was a long pause. I guess so, Frank finally said, but he didn't sound convinced. As soon as she hung up, Karen's doorbell rang. Peering through the peephole, she saw Tim Foster standing on her porch, looking uncomfortable but determined. Karen opened the door just wide enough to speak. Yes? Karen, we need to talk, Tim said. Not as adversaries, as neighbors. I believe we're well past that point, Karen replied coldly. If you want to discuss HOA matters, the meeting is on Friday. This isn't about the HOA, Tim said. It's about you. Karen stiffened. Excuse me? We're worried about you, Tim continued. This obsession with rules and control that's gotten out of hand. We know you've been through a lot. The divorce, losing your job. How dare you, Karen hissed, her face flushing. My personal life is none of your business. It became our business when you started using the HOA as a weapon to work through your issues, Tim said gently. Karen, there's a difference between maintaining community standards and what you're doing. Karen felt exposed, vulnerable. How did they know about her personal setbacks? Had she been the subject of neighborhood gossip all this time? The thought made her stomach churn with humiliation. Get off my property, she managed to say, her voice tight. Now, Tim sighed. We're meeting at the Johnsons. If you change your mind, you're welcome to join us. We actually want to work with you, Karen, not against you. As he walked away, Karen closed the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. They were talking about her, pitying her, planning against her. But one thing she couldn't bear, to be powerless again, to be the subject of others' decisions rather than the decider. She reached for her phone and scrolled to a contact she had hoped never to use, Bernard Wilkins, the developer who still owns several lots in Mountain Vista and held significant sway in HOA matters. Karen had never liked Bernard. He was everything she despised in men of power, arrogant, condescending, and smug. But desperate times called for desperate ally. Bernard Wilkins' office reeked of leather and expensive cologne, a carefully curated atmosphere of masculine success that made Karen's skin crawl even as she grudgingly admired its effectiveness. The developer lounged behind his mahogany desk, his salt and pepper hair artfully tousled, his smile revealing teeth too white to be natural. "Karen Moore," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. "To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? I believe you considered me the enemy of your precious HOA rulebook." Karen sat stiffly, clutching her purse. "Circumstances change. I have a situation that requires intervention." Bernard's smile widened. "A coup in the kingdom? I heard rumblings. Your subjects are getting restless." Karen swallowed her pride. "There's a faction attempting to undermine the standards we've established, standards that protect property values, including on your remaining undeveloped lots." Bernard leaned forward, suddenly interested. "Go on." "They're calling a special meeting Friday. With your proxy votes from the unsold lots, plus my supporters, we can maintain the current regulations." Karen hesitated, then added, "and perhaps enhance enforcement options." Bernard studied her for a long moment. "And what's in it for me?" This was the part Karen had dreaded. "What do you want?" "Exemptions," Bernard said immediately. "My new builds need variances from those ridiculous paint color restrictions you implemented. And I want the landscaping requirements relaxed for my properties." Karen felt physically ill. Everything she had fought for, consistency, uniformity, control, Bernard wanted to undermine for his gaudy modern monstrosities that violated every aesthetic principle she valued. "Those standards exist for a reason," she argued weakly. Bernard shrugged. "Then handle your revolution alone." They stared at each other in silence, a battle of wills. Finally, Karen nodded. "Fine. Exemptions for your new constructions only. Nothing retroactive. And you'll stop harassing my prospective buyers with your 3-hour HOA orientation sessions," Bernard added. "I've lost sales because of your enthusiasm." Each concession felt like a personal defeat, but Karen had no choice. "Agreed." Bernard extended his hand. "Then we have a deal, Madam President." As Karen drove home, she tried to convince herself she had made the right decision. A tactical retreat on some fronts to win the larger war. But deep down, she knew she had compromised her principles out of fear of losing the only thing that gave her identity and purpose. At home, Karen poured herself another glass of wine and stared at the framed HOA Service Award on her wall, an honor she had created and presented to herself at the last annual meeting. For the first time, she felt a flicker of shame about it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Frank. "Meeting at Johnson's broke up. 37 attendees. They were voting on something." Karen texted back immediately. "What? What were they voting on?" The reply came a minute later. "Don't know. They stopped talking when they saw me looking through the window." Karen groaned. Frank's surveillance skills left much to be desired. Another text from him arrived. "They seemed happy, though. Lots of clapping." That couldn't be good. Karen paced her living room, trying to imagine what they were planning. A complete overhaul of the regulations, her removal as president, legal action against her personally. The doorbell rang again, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. This time it was Jessica Taylor, the last person Karen expected or wanted to see. "What now?" Karen demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. Jessica held out a folder. "The agenda for Friday's meeting. We thought you shouldn't have advance notice of the proposals being discussed." Karen snatched the folder, suspicious of this courtesy. "Fine." "Also," Jessica continued, "we noticed Frank peering through the Johnsons' windows earlier. If you're curious about what we're discussing, you could just attend the meetings instead of sending your security officer to spy on us." Karen felt her face flush. "Frank acts on his own initiative." "Sure he does," Jessica said with an eye roll. "Anyway, review the agenda. We actually think you might be surprised." After Jessica left, Karen opened the folder with trepidation. She scanned the document, her confusion growing with each item. There were indeed proposed changes to the HOA regulations, but not what she expected. Instead of eliminating rules, they were proposing to streamline them, making them clearer and more consistently enforceable. There were suggestions for community building events, a more transparent fine appeals process, and most surprisingly, a paid part-time position for a community standards coordinator. The job description outlined duties that were essentially what Karen already did, but with official hours, compensation, and accountability to the board. Karen read it 3 times, trying to understand the angle. Were they trying to bribe her, professionalize her out of power, or was this a genuine attempt at compromise? Her phone rang, displaying Bernard's number. She answered warily. "I've been approached by the Johnsons," Bernard said without preamble. "Interesting proposal they have." "Did you know about this?" "I just received the agenda," Karen admitted. "They're offering me better terms than you did," Bernard continued. "Faster approval process, simplified requirements, but still maintaining overall community aesthetics. Plus, no bad blood with the residents. I'm reconsidering our arrangement." "You can't back out now," Karen protested. "We had a deal." "I'm a businessman, Karen," Bernard replied coldly. "I go where the advantage lies. You might consider doing the same." The call ended, leaving Karen staring at her phone in disbelief. Her alliance had lasted less than 3 hours. She was back where she started, but now with Bernard potentially working against her. The walls of Karen's immaculate home suddenly felt like they were closing in. Everything was spiraling out of control again, just like when she received the layoff notice, just like when she found the divorce papers on her perfectly set dining room table. But this time, instead of grasping for control, a tiny voice inside Karen whispered a new question. What if letting go wasn't the same as failure? Thursday morning dawned with an unusual sight. Karen's driveway remained empty. No early patrol, no clipboard, no measuring tape. At 7:15 a.m., several neighbors texted each other to confirm the strange development. By 7:30, theories were circulating. Karen was sick. Karen was plotting. Karen had fled town. The truth was both simpler and more complex. Karen sat at her kitchen table in her bathrobe, a personal violation of her own strict morning schedule, surrounded by old photo albums and folders of HOA documents. She had been there since 3 a.m. after waking from a dream about her former life that left her gasping for breath. The photos showed a different Karen, laughing at a company picnic, arm in arm with her ex-husband on a Hawaiian beach, hosting dinner parties where no one discussed lawn height violations or unapproved mailboxes. That Karen had friends. That Karen had joy. Between the albums lay the folder Jessica had delivered, open to the job description for the Community Standards Coordinator position. 20 hours a week, $30 per hour, official authority but within defined boundaries. A role with purpose, but without the all-consuming obsession her voluntary position had become. Karen's phone buzzed. Frank again. "No patrol today." She ignored it, turning instead to her laptop, where she had spent the early morning hours researching something she had never expected to investigate herself. Control issues after divorce, she had typed into the search engine, followed by workaholic tendencies, coping with job loss through control, and finally, most painfully, why does everyone hate the HOA president? The results had been illuminating, if difficult to accept. Article after article described people just like her, men and women who, after experiencing significant personal losses, sought to reclaim control through the enforcement of rules on others. Therapists called it a maladaptive coping mechanism. Internet commenters were less charitable. A knock at the door finally pulled Karen from her research. Through the peephole, she saw Aisha Johnson, looking determined but not hostile. Karen hesitated, then opened the door, acutely aware of her unkempt appearance. "Yes?" Aisha seemed momentarily taken aback by Karen's bathrobe and lack of makeup, but recovered quickly. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Karen. We noticed you weren't out this morning, and well, some of us were concerned." "Concerned I might be planning some new enforcement tactic, you mean," Karen said flatly. "Actually concerned about you," Aisha corrected. "Despite everything, you're still our neighbor." The sincerity in Aisha's voice caught Karen off guard. "I'm fine," she said automatically, then, surprising herself, added, "Would you like to come in?" Aisha's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. "Yes, thank you." As Aisha entered, her eyes fell on the spread of photos and documents on the table. Karen felt exposed, but made no move to hide them. "Coffee?" Karen offered stiffly, unfamiliar with having a neighbor in her home as a guest rather than a rule-breaker summoned for a violation hearing. "That would be nice," Aisha said, still glancing at the photos. "You look happy in these." Karen busied herself with the coffee maker. "I was. Or I thought I was." "What happened?" Aisha asked gently, sitting at the table. Karen had never discussed her personal life with anyone in the neighborhood. The very idea violated her self-imposed boundaries between professional HOA management and personal matters. But something about the early morning hours of reflection, the photos of her former self, and Aisha's unexpected kindness broke through those boundaries. "Life happened," Karen said, setting 2 mugs of coffee on the table. "Job loss. Divorce. Starting over at 50. The HOA was something I could control when everything else was falling apart." Aisha nodded. "I suspected something like that. My mother went through similar struggles after my father left. She reorganized the pantry 14 times in 1 month." A reluctant smile tugged at Karen's lips. "Only 14? Amateur." They shared a brief laugh, the first genuine moment of connection Karen had experienced with a neighbor in years. The job description, Karen said, pointing to the folder. Was that your idea? Michael's, actually, Aisha replied. He said, we've been looking at this all wrong. The community does need standards and oversight. We just need them applied fairly, transparently, and with some common sense flexibility. Like allowing family heirloom garden gnomes? Karen asked Riley. Exactly, Aisha smiled. Karen, you're actually good at what you do. You're organized, detail-oriented, and you care about the community in your own way. We just need to channel those qualities more constructively. Karen stared into her coffee cup. And if I'm not interested in the position, then we'll find someone else, Aisha said simply. But we prefer it to be you. No one knows these regulations better, and despite everything, people respect your commitment. Karen looked up in surprise. They do. Some of it, yes, Aisha admitted. Though the golf cart security patrol might have been a step too far. Karen winced. That wasn't my finest moment. Look, Aisha said, the meeting tomorrow isn't about ousting you. It's about creating a better system that works for everyone, including you. Will you at least consider it? As Aisha left, Karen returned to the table and picked up a photo of herself from 10 years ago, smiling broadly at a company awards ceremony. That Karen had found fulfillment in achievement, not in catching others' failures. That Karen had colleagues, not subjects. For the first time in years, Karen allowed herself to consider that perhaps her path to regaining control wasn't through controlling others, but through reconciling with herself. With a deep breath, she picked up her phone and made a call she'd been avoiding for months. Dr. Patel's office. This is Karen Moore. I'd like to schedule that appointment we discussed. The Mountain Vista Community Center buzzed with energy as residents filed in for the 7 p.m. meeting. Karen, dressed in her usual HOA president attire, a tailored blazer and pencil skirt, but without her trademark clipboard, stood at the back watching. Nearly every household was represented, a stark contrast to normal HOA meetings where attendance rarely broke into double digits. Karen noted with a mixture of amusement and chagrin that several residents physically startled upon seeing her without her clipboard, as if she had appeared without a vital limb. Michael Johnson approached, extending his hand. Karen, thank you for coming. Karen shook his hand formally. I'm still the HOA president. It would be inappropriate for me to miss a community meeting. Of course, Michael nodded. We set up a place for you at the front if you'd like to join us. Karen hesitated. She had spent the past 24 hours oscillating between defensiveness, resignation, and cautious optimism. Her therapist had suggested she approach the meeting with an open mind, focusing on listening rather than controlling the outcome. Easier said than done for someone who had micromanaged every aspect of community life for years. I'll sit in the audience tonight, Karen decided. This is your meeting. Michael seemed surprised but nodded. As you wish. Karen found a seat in the middle row, acutely aware of the curious glances from neighbors who had never seen her in any position other than at the front, ruling with her gavel and bylaws. Tim Foster, sitting nearby, gave her a tentative smile, which she acknowledged with a small nod. Jessica Taylor called the meeting to order precisely at 7 p.m., one of Karen's policies that had apparently stuck. Karen felt an unexpected twinge of pride at the punctuality. Welcome, everyone, Jessica began. We're here tonight to discuss some proposed changes to our HOA structure and regulations. But first, I want to clarify something important. This isn't about tearing down the systems that protect our community. It's about improving them to better serve all residents. Karen listened as Jessica outlined the proposed changes, many of which were reasonable adjustments to rules that Karen, in her more reflective moments of the past day, had admitted to herself were perhaps overly rigid. The 3-inch grass limit would become 4 inches. The approval process for exterior modifications would be streamlined with clearer guidelines. Fines would still exist, but with a more transparent appeals process. And finally, Jessica continued, we propose creating a paid, part-time position of community standards coordinator to handle the day-to-day oversight that our current president has been managing on a volunteer basis. All eyes turned to Karen. She kept her expression neutral, though her heart raced. We'd like to formally offer this position to Karen Moore, Jessica said, in recognition of her knowledge and dedication to our community. The room fell silent, waiting for Karen's reaction. She had rehearsed this moment mentally, preparing a gracious but non-committal response. But when she stood, what came out surprised even her. Before I address that offer, Karen said, her voice steady, I owe this community an apology. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. I've approached my role with excessive zeal, Karen continued. What began as a desire to maintain standards became something personal, something inflexible. For that, I apologize. The silence in the room was deafening. Karen Moore, the unyielding enforcer of Mountain Vista, was apologizing. Several residents exchanged astonished glances. That said, Karen went on, I do believe in the importance of community standards. I believe in the value of consistency and care in how we maintain our homes and common spaces. But I've learned rather late, I admit, that rules without relationship lead to rebellion. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I would be honored to consider the coordinator position with one condition, that we establish a quarterly community feedback session, where residents can suggest improvements to our processes. If we're going to do this, let's do it right, with rules that serve the people, not the other way around. The proposal was met with murmurs of approval. Michael Johnson stood. I think that's an excellent suggestion. Shall we put it to a vote? What followed was the most civil and productive HOA meeting in Mountain Vista's history. Proposals were discussed, amended, and approved. The paid position was created with Karen's feedback condition included. Even Bernard Wilkins, who attended expecting a bloodbath, found himself voting in favor of most measures, seeing the business sense in a community with clear but reasonable standards. As the meeting concluded, residents lingered, talking in small groups. Karen found herself approached by neighbors who had avoided her for years, offering tentative congratulations or suggestions for the new role.